A legendary Walt Disney animation director has called out the company for being complacent and maybe even being a little too woke. Let's talk about John Musker's comments here on That Park Place. Hello, I am Jonas J. Campbell, an investigative reporter for That Park Place, and here with me is imagination connoisseur, Mr. VashSky. Vash, how are you doing?
Well, I'm doing very well. I'm about to have my wish granted here. Referencing Aladdin, of course, and referencing a film that John Musker has been a part of, because I think we're about to hear him talk about what we've been talking about on this channel and others for a while now.
That's true. That's very true. And just for those of you who are not aware, let's talk about, I'm just going to list off a bunch of movies real quick, and you tell me whether or not on the whole these are the greatest animated features of all time. First of all, Great Mouse Detective, Little Mermaid, Aladdin, Hercules, Treasure Planet, Princess and the Frog, and Moana. Yeah, this guy has a little bit of a pedigree to him here. Disney legend John Musker lampoons Disney for going woke. They need to do a course correction. This is from John Trent from That Park Place. We ought to have him on the channel sometime. Disney legend John Musker, whose credits include The Little Mermaid, Hercules, Aladdin, Princess and the Frog, and Moana. That, to me, looks like a lot of things that they're putting into the parks right now. Lampooned the Walt Disney Company for prioritizing wokeness over entertainment. In an interview with Spanish outlet El País, El País, Musker commented on his work with The Princess and the Frog. We weren't trying to be woke, although I understand the criticism. The classic Disney films didn't start out trying to have a message. They wanted you to get involved in the characters and the story and the world, and I think that's still the heart of it. I would totally disagree with the idea that The Princess and the Frog was trying to be woke. This is an argument that I had frequently back in the day, because Disney was doing a thing where they were trying to expand the lineup from a diversity standpoint for the Princess collection. Obviously, Mulan created they didn't create the character, but they created a merchandising line that included an Asian princess. Of course, Princess and the Frog had a African-American princess. Little Mermaid, whether or not they wanted to admit it, she was Dutch. It is a Danish fairy tale, although that doesn't come into it at that point. And I'm trying to think what else. Pocahontas being Native American, and Jasmine being Middle Eastern, although she doesn't really read as Middle Eastern because they did not cast Middle Eastern actor or actress in those roles. So it took a long time for Disney to claim them as diverse characters. Vash, do you view Princess and the Frog as a woke film?
No, I would not say that's a woke film. You see, here's the thing. Just because a film is diverse doesn't necessarily make it woke. So I don't think of those two as interchangeable in that way. Obviously, diversity for diversity's sake is an aspect of woke. I would say that for sure. But I think like Prince and the Frog, this is what's been so weird about this whole thing, by the way, too. When it comes to like Splash Mountain, for example, and this whole food co-op thing, Prince and the Frog, Tiana herself, she's always preaching about like, hey, you got to work hard for what you can get. You know, you can't just wish upon a star. You have to work for it. I think her dad entrusts those values into her. So it's like the messaging as relates to the attraction and the film, they're definitely in conflict there.
Right. And I would say that whatever definition of woke that John Musker appears to be working with here is not the definition that I think most people would accept. Critical constructivist, where the idea of woke is to try to say that the current society needs to be criticized and torn down, and that they can construct a new one. Constructivist being that they believe that all aspects of society have been constructed in a specific way for a specific intention, and that any disparity is constructed by that system on purpose. I think that's the problem here. I don't see any of that in Princess and the Frog. Again, those ideals of hard work and individualism there. Also, that individualism, serving the community, but not losing your individualism in that community. I don't see any problem with that from a quote unquote non-woke standpoint here. So I wouldn't call this movie woke. It is diverse when you compare it with other films, and maybe Disney was aiming for this specifically to be diverse, but it wasn't at the cost of the story. So I don't see it as woke, but let's talk a little bit more here. And by the way, any messaging in that film appears to be work hard and you might achieve your dreams. So definitely not a what I would traditionally associate with the idea of wokeness here. He added, you don't have to exclude agendas, but you have to first create characters who you sympathize with and who are compelling. Next, Musker declared, I think they need to do a course correction a bit in terms of putting the message secondary behind entertainment and compelling story and engaging characters. Well, if that were the case, then it probably wouldn't be woke. In my opinion. What do you think about that statement?
I did find that to be very interesting from John Musker here. So he's obviously acknowledging the term woke, not fully committing to a definition, but also kind of saying, look, regardless of what you actually think of woke or what woke means or whatever, it doesn't necessarily matter when you look at the bigger picture and see that they have kind of lost their way. And this is interesting too, because we recently heard Mark Henn talk about this as well, famous animator, lead animator on Bell and so forth, talk about how the work wasn't fulfilling. And obviously, if you pair this with Alan Ng's amazing reporting from the D-Files, then you get this kind of bigger picture of, oh, they're really pushing out, as Alan would say, the old white guys. And I think this is partially what John is talking about here, but more broadly speaking, they've just lost their way in terms of their creative output in general, in terms of both their culture inside and what films come from that.
Right, and Musker retired from the company in 2017, as far as I can tell. He does have a credit from 2019, but I think that is one of those archival things because it was for Little Mermaid Live. So he was gone before we're seeing some of the push that we're seeing from inside of the company right now. Also, what's funny is like Moana, for instance. I don't think Moana, which I count Moana as a Disney princess myself, even though she's like the chief. She is either the chief's daughter, so she's in line. She puts her conch shell up on top of the island there. By the way, kind of ruins the idea of if all of these stones are flat and to be stacked on top. The conch being put on top of all of those kind of says, well, I'm the last one here. No one else is able to stack anything on top there. Moana is not a diverse film. When you look at the film itself, it's not an example of diversity unless you look at the entire pantheon of Walt Disney animated features, because everyone in that movie is Polynesian. There is some diversity in it when you really zoom out, but it's not really a diverse film. Not only did Musker criticize Disney for prioritizing wokeness, he also criticized the company for its live action remakes of animated film. He said, companies are always like, how do we reduce our risk? They like this, right? We'll just do it again and sell it to them in a different form. Or they think, well, we could make it better. Interesting. He specifically criticized Disney's most recent live action adaptation of The Little Mermaid, and I think this is a really good point. I think there was a question even with The Little Mermaid. They didn't play up the father-daughter story, and that was the heart of the movie in a way. First of all, he cages his statement here by saying it is a part of the movie. The primary conflict within The Little Mermaid is Ariel and her conflict with her father. The conflict with Ursula is kind of secondary. It comes as a foil to her conflict with her father. Ursula uses that relationship with her father as a wedge between them. Eric is in there, and Eric is secondary, but obviously the people who made the film, they weren't really as worried about the romance aspect of it. By the way, the main plot had a romance in it because romance sells tickets. I happen to notice this in looking at a lot of films. Romance does sell tickets here. So I would agree. The film, the conflict of the original Little Mermaid starts and ends with a conflict with her father. Vash, did you watch the most recent Little Mermaid? Did you get that vibe here between the old one and the new one, that they weren't really understanding what the original was about?
I wanted to watch it. It's hard to see the film because it was so desaturated and dim. What is going on there? That's very weird.
That's a very good point. If you look at this one still frame that we have here, it's not very bright, as opposed to that scene in the original animation is a little bit more subdued and subtle in the part of your world sequence. But they go back and forth between trying to hide the CGI and in trying to put all of these colors on display. And I don't know if it works in live action the same way it does in animation. I think it dates the film a little bit more than the animated ones.
And look, John Musker comes from kind of this old school. Now, he was part of the Cal Arts crew, Joe Rampt, John Lasseter, Tim Burton, Ron Clements, all these great, amazing animators that came out of this seemingly one classroom, which was quite fascinating. He and a lot of his Cal Arts classmates went through a lot during the point at which just before the Renaissance really kicked off right there. And so this is a guy who's been through it. This is somebody who understands great storytelling. And so I can't imagine from his perspective what the company has been going through and what I mean, it's just been insane. It's been insane for us to watch, but for somebody like this, it's got to be crazy. By the way, I had the distinct privilege and honor of sitting behind this gentleman right here during the Legend ceremony along with Ron Clements. That was pretty cool.
Oh, that's so cool.
It's interesting how this has all come full circle for me.
Let's move on with this so we can wrap this video up. Earlier in the interview, he also criticized the way Disney makes films now as well. While talking about his work on Moana, he shared, Moana was a very difficult project. It was our idea, but with Pixar and John Lasseter, our story kept changing hands. In the 90s, we had Jeffrey Katzenberg. He was an emperor, you know, but there weren't 10 Jeffreys. I think he might be referring to the Story Trust and the Brain Trust. Now you have too many people to satisfy. Before, we didn't have 15 directors telling you how to make the movie, but in some ways they were right. It was a good thing. He said, yes, that to me clearly says that he wasn't necessarily a fan of the Story Trust that they had in the Walt Disney Animation Department. I can understand trying to push away from that because it's a very difficult process to deal with, having all of those people in that room give you notes. And you don't have to work on the notes. You don't have to accept the notes, but they are supposed to be given in the spirit of improving the film. With that being said, I would kind of like to see John Musker return to the Walt Disney Company. It would give me so much confidence if he was brought in as one of those members of the Story Trust there for the Walt Disney Company. It's a funny thing. Maybe having him in one of those roles would actually fix some of the things that we're seeing going on in Disney animation. I thought Strange World was one of the worst things that Walt Disney Animation could ever do, but that was only before I saw Wish, which we're now hearing that may have taken 3 to 6 months to do its primary animation, which is not enough. Why do I say that it's not enough? Because I've seen Wish. Vash, do you have any thoughts before we wrap this up?
The state of animation within Disney is very, very dire. And that goes across the board, whether it's Pixar or Disney, or previously Disney feature animation. It is a really tough time right now. It has to be tough for a lot of these old timers looking at the situation from afar. And you just have to see the output. Like you said, Wish, Strange World. I mean, these are not good films, and it doesn't look like things are changing for the better. I keep waiting for Bob Iger and his accountability preaching to really manifest in tangible ways, like, hey, let's move away from Jennifer Lee and some of this other nonsense. But unfortunately, that is yet to come to pass, and John Musker is, I think, letting his voice be heard on this issue after seeing it for so long.
So we want to throw this to our commenters. What do you think about John Musker's comments? Do you think, Ron Clements, if you're watching, just weigh in. Be sure to identify yourself in the comments. Let us know your thoughts on wokeness as well. That being said, like this video if you like this video, and consider subscribing to That Park Plays for all the news that should be fun.
Thanks for watching That Park Plays News. For more information, consider checking out www.thatparkplace.com. And don't forget to subscribe, share, like, and send this out on your favorite social media accounts.